And welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It is Extreme Results, and I'm David Rubin. And I have a special guest, my personal trainer. We're going to talk about how to get you beyond those obstacles that are standing in your way of you achieving your ultimate personal best. Here is the main problem with most people that they don't understand is in their way, keeping them from the ultimate success. You think, and I used to think, that stress was my biggest problem. Is stress a real problem? It absolutely is. But here is the key. There are so many things in life that you have no control over. Virtually millions of things you have no control over. But one thing you do have control over, and that is your reactions. So if you don't understand this one principle, as long as you see stress as the problem, you will never come to understand that it is the way in which you allow it to affect you that is the reason why you are completely stressed out and often overwhelmed. Now, what do I mean by letting stress affect you? Let's say, for example, you're locked in a traffic gridlock and you want to get home or you need to get to work or you're late for an appointment and you start to feel the pressure building. What can you do about that situation? You can't drive on the sidewalk. You don't have a helicopter, so you can't go above the traffic. We have become aware of this huge problem called road rage. I don't know anybody that doesn't have it from time to time. What is road rage? Well, you're stuck in traffic, there's nothing you can do, and you start getting angry at the situation. Sometimes it could be somebody's had an accident or broken down or whatever the case may be. But the point is, you're in a situation where you have a choice to make about how you're going to react. That's the bottom line. If you catch yourself before you go too far, you can say, hold on a minute. There's nothing I can do. I've just got to sit this one out. I've just got to accept the circumstance. Now, that's when you have made a critical decision about the direction your mind is going to go from that moment on. Usually, it's a domino effect. When you start to react, when you start to get upset, and especially in a situation like a traffic jam or being late for work, when you start to get upset, it creates a domino effect so that you're out of your center, so that the people that you encounter can sense that you're stressed out. And that's another problem, too, because you can project the wrong energy toward a customer or your wife or husband or your kids without intending to, simply because you got in a traffic jam. That's just one example. It's a common example, and a lot of people get frustrated driving in traffic because there are so many things that are beyond their control, and this is the first key. You can't control that. So you've got to step back for just a split second and observe yourself, look at yourself responding to any form of stress. And in that moment, everything can change. For example, if you want to be a fine artist, or if you want to be a great guitar player, or if you want to be a good auto mechanic, or anything that you do, if you want to be a good contractor, you got to work at it every single day. And if you want to build a great life, you've got to work at building that life in the same way that you would work at any other craft. It's so critical to understand that every moment that you waste is a moment that's lost, and that every moment that you are not decisive about taking charge of your perspective about problems, about stress, about obstacles in life. Every moment that you hesitate is a moment that you've lost. Every day that you don't build the house that you're building is one more day that you're going to spend building it. So you can't put it off. You must learn simple principles of stress management, self-management, that'll change your entire life. It'll change the way you relate to people. It'll change the way that people relate to you. It'll change the way that you look at the way you're living your life. You'll find that you have more time than you ever believed you had if you just learn how to be patient. Instead of getting frustrated and trying to force things to happen, if you just step back, watch your reaction in every situation, observe yourself and your response to any form of stress, and everything in that moment can change, and the positive outcomes will begin falling like dominoes. You'll have more positive experiences than you could possibly imagine. I want to give you the 3 principles of setting yourself up for failure. Once you hear them, you're going to understand something that you've never understood before. So here goes with principle number 1. I call it the hot potato. What is a hot potato, you ask? The hot potato is the stress that exists outside of you. It's a problem outside of you that someone else has, and they want to give it to you. So here's what happens. The minute you become affected by any negative form of external stimulus, it doesn't matter what it is. Let's say, for example, you drop something and you have to bend over and pick it up, and you could get frustrated at that. The minute you become frustrated or upset, in that moment, you've lost control. You're out of balance. Here's principle number 2. what happens if somebody has a problem and they don't know what to do with it? Oftentimes, they unconsciously want to give it away. So here's the second thing that we do, that we set ourselves up for failure, is that somehow many people believe that they have an obligation to take other people's problems. If you react to somebody who is out of their center, or if somebody tries to give you a hot potato, somebody's rude with you, impatient, ignores you. And these are situations where you're at a restaurant, you're pulling up to the gas station, somebody cuts you off on the freeway. These are all hot potato situations. The reality is you have no obligation to take a hot potato from anyone for any reason. Now, if you don't take the hot potato, who has it? That's right, they do. All forms of stress are requiring something of you that you may not have. And that one thing is patience. And here's principle number 3. When you're irritated by anything, you lose your balance. No wonder you can't deal with the littlest things. And as you go through your day, if you don't correct your balance, everything that you do is going to be affected by you losing your center. Now, my personal trainer, welcome to Extreme Results.
Thanks, David. Appreciate it.
How did your day start today?
I got up this morning, and as I rolled out of bed, my mind just started to drift straight off into negativity. And I caught myself going, whoa, this thing cannot be left to chance. It just runs wild. Is this me thinking, or does it have a life of its own? And I realized you cannot leave your mind to chance.
So let's just go over this for a minute. What were the negative things that were kind of popping up?
Negative things from the days prior, from the week prior, say problems with business. They were negative issues. And I remember mumbling some names and stuff like that, and some issues that I had earlier.
But in that moment that you saw yourself be pulled toward those negative thoughts, what did you do?
I had the ability to stand outside myself and go, look at that. I caught myself, and it was like viewing somebody else and going, it was shocking because I was almost like another person looking at myself. So that was a new stage of, so shall we say, evolution mentally for me.
Well, see, that's what I call being objective. And the way I describe that, and we've talked about this before, is being the observer of the thought rather than the thinker of the thought. And of course, what happens at that point is that watching your thinking process, and at that point, what did you have?
What I had was the ability to look at what was happening and say, I have some control myself.
Exactly. You had a choice to make. It reminds me, too, of the point at which a lot of people will get comfortable on their couch at nighttime after a long day. You'll be sitting there either reading a book or watching TV or whatever you're doing. And you get comfortable, you start to fall asleep.
Right.
And at that point, you have a choice to make, don't you?
Right.
You say, okay, look, I better get up, go to bed, because if I fall asleep here, I'm going to wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and I'm going to be uncomfortable. Or you let yourself go into that deep sleep. But you know in that moment that you can make that choice.
I totally agree with you. As you know, in the business that I'm in, first of all, it's not the easiest thing to do to exercise. It's one of the hardest things most Americans basically put it on the lowest priority in their life because it's not that pleasurable to start. That's a lot of the reasons that folks have health problems, and we all know that, but we'd rather eat a cheeseburger and lay on our couch at night. But, in my business is mostly it's not muscles, it's mental awakening. It's getting yourself conditioned to say, I have to do this, and by doing this, I'm going to receive pleasure.
Okay, so here's the big conundrum, which is a lot of people get an impulse to do something.
Right.
A person will say, gosh, I'm overweight. I'd better join a gym. I'd better start working out. But when they get there, it's so hard because there have been years that have been allowed to slip by without just taking a walk even. And so the impulse that tells that person, okay, you better do this, is the right impulse. But then what happens with the follow-through is that once the results aren't immediate, people start to lose interest. So how do you get people to look at it from a perspective of saying, look, this is not something that you just jump into and jump out of when you're tired of it? How do you get people to realize that they've got to make a commitment to a long-term perspective on taking care of themselves?
As you know, I train a lot of women clients. I use the emotions of basically, to feel and feel good about themselves continually.
But what happens to people who fall off the wagon, so to speak? What happens to them where they get sidetracked and they get pulled off in other directions? And even though they know it's something that's important for them to do, isn't it because at some level they happen to be what I call outcome-based people, which is what they want is they want a result faster than is reasonably expected?
Yes. That's the reason we have such a problem in America with folks is their inability to focus their minds. So I think once again we're getting back to conditioning yourself from the moment you wake up to what you will believe, what you will accept into your mind.
Well, you said to me the other day, the average person starts their day with a ritual. Some people have a cup of coffee. You said, I start my day directing my thinking.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I thought that was really good. It depends upon what you want that you will focus your energy and your mind toward.
Sure.
So if you don't focus your energy and your mind, then won't external conditions have a tendency to do that for you?
Absolutely, and you're just leading it. You're leaving your mind to chance, and that cup of coffee is going to give you some kind of physical feeling, and it's external, but that's going to go away, and then you left your mind wide open. And few people will do this, and it's extraordinary to you and I, but we realize we must do this.
Well, so beginning your day with the right attitude, focusing your mind, getting control over the thinking apparatus, making sure that you're firmly in grip of the steering wheel of your car. How many times have people sort of just spilt their coffee or reached over to grab something on the other side of the seat and they turn the wheel and they go into a head-on or they spin their car out? This is how sensitive our lives are. This is how quickly our lives can go out of balance. And welcome. It is Extreme Results Radio. I'm David Rubin. And we're talking about the one subject that matters the most, and that is whatever is going on in your life, whatever is going on around your life or in the world that you live in, the one thing that you will always have the control over, if you make that choice, is how you look at it, how you deal with it, and how you feel about it. What we think consistently manifests as our life experience. I've worked with people that never dreamed that they could be as successful as they are. And the simple mechanism that they use in order to maintain their success and continue to rise is their control over themselves. Everyone can have this. Everyone needs to have self-control over the way you think. If you're not in control of your thoughts will be in control of you. And look what happens when you get angry, for example, when you get frustrated. How many times do you get into conflicts with people or with loved ones? When you're upset, you say things and do things that you would never otherwise do. So if you could catch yourself just that moment before that anger takes over and you lose control, you could save yourself a whole lot of suffering and unhappiness. Some people say, well, everything's meant to be. I don't believe that. I really believe that you are the master of your own destiny. And if you do not take the steering wheel, your ship is going to go all over the place until you decide that it's time for you to grab hold of that wheel and do only one thing, and that is be aware of the thoughts that are going through your mind. That's the key. Eric, welcome back.
Thank you, Dave.
One of the topics that you and I talk about is this outcome-based mentality. The people that are the most successful at what they do are what?
Well, there are people that consistently, daily, apply success upon success and program themselves through their day, the beginning of their day, and have control over their minds.
So they're process-based people.
Yeah, to the process-based people.
It all depends upon you getting up every day and having an attitude of not thinking about the outcome, the end result, but just dealing with today's issues, what you can accomplish today rather than trying to look at the whole thing in a big picture and see that result. Because ultimately what happens is when people start to look at a result, they get frustrated. They
Right.
feel overwhelmed.
Well, I can give you an example today, Dave. We went out with some of my trainers, and we did some what I call barbarian marketing, where we hand out flyers and we ask people. And I looked at each trainer as they got a no or eventually they got a yes. We probably got 100 no's and maybe 10 yeses. But one of my trainers just really took it hard, while one of my other trainers was thrilled after 100 no's they got a yes. So I said to this trainer, I said, you can't take this personally. Life is going to have obstacles. So it was interesting just to notice the different glasses they had on their worldview. So isn't it interesting that the people that will choose to think about something totally different that are doing the same thing?
Well, let's talk about it in terms of being process versus outcome-based.
Sure.
A person who is outcome-based looks for the yes. And when they encounter the no, that's exactly the opposite of what they want.
Right.
So if they were to get what they want, then they would feel encouraged. But because they don't get what they want, they feel discouraged, and then they feel defeated.
Right.
So what they're doing is they're allowing external conditions to dictate their internal climate.
Exactly. But he still had a hard time, wasn't it funny, with the rejection he got? It stuck with him that whole day. Okay.
That's a very important topic because failure is a very important component. Learning how to fail correctly is more important than learning how to succeed. Because what happens is that if you don't get a hold of your reaction to failures and problems and mistakes, you can really lose your potential by feeling discouraged. This is very critical. And that is this, that what we think consistently manifests as our life experience. Now, you've got to remember that. Second of all, our thoughts are blueprints for our actions. If you are knocked out of your center by anything, it's going to slowly but surely infect your thinking process. Then at that point, what you see and do depends upon how you look at things. So you can start the day with a positive attitude and end up feeling like the whole world's against you. So where do you go to transform your life? Personal evolution results from a simple concept, and that is of being mentally and emotionally centered in the moment so that you function with complete detachment. And listen to what I'm saying. You detach yourself from fear and worry. That doesn't sound bad, does it? Not only that, but you detach yourself from concern over success or failure. We talked about that earlier with Eric. And here's a simple thing that's so magical. If you don't expect an outcome, you're not going to have anxiety when it doesn't turn out the way you expected it to. This is the power of being process-based. Your thoughts lead to actions, your actions create habits, and those habits determine your destiny. You have to take charge of your thinking processes. You can do that by learning how to be objective. People say, well, what is objective? What is subjective? Being an objective is not being subjective. In other words, if you can step back just for a second and learn how to look at yourself before you react to anything, that is the moment where you gain control. That's the moment that you have total and complete control over what choices you make. It's really up to you. You just have to make the choice about what you're going to do with your life and what direction you want to take it in. You don't have to be a victim. You don't have to be helpless. You can be in charge. Any thoughts you want to add?
I love what you're talking about because it is, I think, the most critical subject of one's life. Mind, I told my trainers today, I have several different locations, and I tell all my trainers, look, your mind will either make you successful or defeat you. And so in this business as well, it's like everything is about the mind and what you will do with it. People need to realize this is of the most important subject that you could talk about.
This is something that people have not been exposed to, I think, in general. If we go to college and we study hard and we learn the various disciplines, we can become scientists, we can become engineers, you can become a fine artist or a graphic designer, whatever you want. But what about creating your own life? Where are the studies that are about the way our minds work? Where's our owner's manual? You know what? There aren't any. There are thousands of books out there, self-help books, that tells you do this, don't do that. But I'm saying it's really simple. If you can understand the simple idea of not being outcome-based, but being process-based, suddenly time slows down. Instead of running out of time, your glass is filling up with time because you understand that you have more time than you ever thought you did, and that the process leads to a better outcome in the long run because you pay more attention to detail. You spend more time focusing on the things that need your attention. When you're outcome-based, you always think about what you want, the end result. You don't think about what it takes to get there. People don't understand that every thought that they think is creating their future. So if you have negative thoughts, negative feelings, like your trainers that we're talking about, if there's a guy that doesn't have self-confidence in there, what if he said, every person that says no to me is going to cause me to become more determined? You have to work out with your experience in life. When you go to grab a set of dumbbells or a heavy bar, you have to work it. You have to have that resistance in order to gain strength. So bad things that happen, let's say obstacles that are in your way or difficulties that are in your way, are nothing more than a workout. If you keep working out, ultimately you're going to find the strength to overcome those difficulties rather than being defeated by them.
Right, and I was trying to tell him, look, the more difficulty you have and someone saying no, just look at it as right on. I'm going to get a yes. And he was, it started to change his mind, but he was like, whoa, I guess somewhere I got programmed to have rejection and it to ruin my whole day.
And you've just brought up one of my favorite sayings, which is we're all born to succeed, but we're programmed to fail.
Right on.
I've seen lives of people change, people that could never have been successful without certain ideas, without certain concepts around which they could shape their perspective. And once those people grabbed on to those principles, the positive principles of powerful thinking, their lives radically changed, and they didn't even understand why, because they weren't trying to make it change. It changed all by itself. Isn't that true?
Absolutely. In fact, I direct my trainers to your site, and I said, okay, tomorrow, guys, I'm going to ask you about what you thought, and let's bring up an intelligent discussion on David's website. Some of them will do it. Some will say, well, I didn't get time. The ones that do it, they're ready to take control of their life. The ones that give me excuses, I say, oh, right there, we got to work on procrastination.